Well, Governor Wallace of Alabama has become a national symbol for blind resistance to any kind of change in the in the relationship of the races. He's an advocate of segregation, and this is the issue. If he should prevail, it would mean that America would have to be turned into an armed camp to segregate our races, or in the alternative, we'll have bloodshed and violence. I happen to believe that society should change or will change, and that a responsible government will make it possible for the change to come without bloodshed or violence. I think that Governor Wallace represents the last vestige of the segregationist point of view, and that this is the main issue.
There has been quite a bit of panic about our peach situation the last few hours, but I'd like to say that this time, after checking a number of orchards throughout the central, north, and southern part of the county, that we're not in as bad a shape as we could be. However, we are completely out on a few varieties. Alberta, Keystone are the two that I think we're wiped out with. However, we have set a pretty heavy crop, seem like, on some of the early ones, some of the mid-season, the Ranger, the mid-season, Dixie Red, Cardinal, Highland of the early season. We're going to be on the market with some real quality fruit this summer. We know that we won't have a bumper crop, we won't have a normal crop, but we expect to have probably 25 or 30% of a normal crop.
And communism is the same today as when he made that statement. Because, as I say, just a minute ago, he's added, since we recognize Russia as a communistic state or government, they've added 100 million people behind the Iron Curtains around the world. All you've got to do is think in terms of the Baltic states, Poland, think in terms of their control today of Cuba. Think in terms of China, and don't forget, basically China and Moscow want to dominate the world. Their philosophy is identical. One wants to do it by war, and the other wants to do it by coexistence. Catch you when you're asleep, and we have been asleep.
Senator Fulbright called Cuba a nuisance to the United States rather than a menace. How do you feel about that?
He's the biggest nuisance in the United States government or Senate. The most impractical and the most fictitious senator you've got. How can he afford to say things like that as head of the Foreign Relations Committee?
What's been most heartening to me is to see the political leaders, both the Democrats and the Republicans, the church leaders and the civic leaders, are almost unanimous in their condemnation of Governor Wallace and the immoral political philosophy that he espouses. I think they see that if he gets any votes to mount anything in Wisconsin, it'll give a heart to the hate mongers from coast to coast. And after all, we want a society in which all of our people can live as good American citizens and where they're not chopping each other up.
We had a tremendous amount of damage. You can see on a limb like this, if 90% of these buds, these blooms were damaged, we would have still fruit left. On this particular limb, there are 9 good peaches left. That would be all it would really need. So here's what I'd like to say. We've had tremendous damage, but we're going to be on the market with some real quality fruit this summer. We'll be able to supply our regular customers with fruit, and we know quality will be good unless we have more damage. We have some varieties that are completely wiped out, but we have many varieties growing here in this area. The Alberta is practically gone. The Ranger, Keystone, several of the good peaches are practically wiped out, but we still are going to have a lot of good fruit on the market. We're going to concentrate mainly on our local markets because the farmers make more money due to the extra cost in packaging, shipping, handling, and we're going to supply our local markets. I think we'll have plenty of fruit to do this instead of concentrating primarily on out-of-state markets.
You can't cut taxes without being honest with yourself, without cutting the cost of government to equal a cut in taxes. Then you're balancing. You haven't had a balanced budget only a few times, 23 years out of the 33 that you haven't had, and always deficits in the great majority. But never have you paid a single penny toward reducing that debt. Suppose you had a mortgage on your home. How long do you suppose you'd get along that way? That's all it is, mortgaging the future of generations coming to this country.
Prices in Alabama are about 25% lower than they were this time last year, and we find that more than 12% of the total production of beef in this country last year was imported from foreign countries. And this is a far cry from just 4 or 5 years ago when it's 1.5%.
What did you say that figure was? It's 1,700,000,000 pounds.
1,750,000,000 pounds of beef was imported, and that
1963.
In 1963, and that represented nearly 4 million head of cattle that some good Alabama cattleman could have fed and made some money on.
Mr. Culver, we've heard reports of an impending shortage of coins in circulation. Is there any basis in this?
No, sir, not now. There's not a shortage of coin. They have been in weeks past. Federal Reserve has received a new shipment from the Mint. There is not a shortage now. The silver dollars, there are a shortage in the silver dollars. I understand that there was about $28 billion minted. They have not minted any since 1935, and the Treasury now has about $3 million on hand.
The Senate Banking and Currency Committee tomorrow will open hearings on legislation to keep the silver dollar alive. They plan to cut the silver content from the present 90% to 80%. Now, does this mean that the silver dollar right now is worth more than $1?
No, sir, it does not. But if the silver dollar is melted down, I understand that it's worth $1.29.
How is the current supply of Kennedy half dollars?
The current supply of Kennedy half a dollars, there will be 90 million pieces issued, which will be $45 million. The halves are to be minted for the next 25 years unless changed by Congress.
Is there much ready supply of them right now?
Right now there is 26 million of them have been released by the Mint.
The Legislative Council has been in session all day. We have been considering a matter of textbooks. We had a study made to determine whether the parents of the school children in Alabama
development and coordination of overall policies, plans, and procedures for the provision of a centralized control of all modes of transportation, that's air, sea, truck, and railway, in an emergency for the movement of passenger and freight traffic of all types, and the determination of the proper apportionment and allocation of the total civil transportation capacity or any portion thereof to meet the overall essential civil and military needs. To meet the provisions of this executive order, the Office of Emergency Transportation, and I'll refer to that as OET for short, has been established in the Department of Commerce at the national level. In the event of an emergency, the Office of Emergency Transportation would be extended, and there would be a regional office of the emergency transportation at the 8 OCD OEP regions. OET would absorb such agencies as the Interstate Commerce Commission, the Bureau of Public Roads, the Federal Aviation Administration, the Civil Aeronautics Board, and perhaps others that have an interest in transportation, depending on the area involved.
The Alabama cattlemen are really concerned about the large increase of foreign beef into this state and into the nation. In fact, it's really hurting the cattle business. It's estimated last year that the Alabama cattlemen lost many millions of dollars because of the importation of foreign beef into Alabama. And we are anxious to get something done through legislation, and we've called on everyone in the state, our congressmen, our commissioner of agriculture, and our senators, to help pass laws that would limit the importation of foreign beef into this country, which would help the cattle business in Alabama.
That's right. I think when Mississippi and Louisiana and Florida and Alabama and Georgia gets together here on April the 9th with the cattle leaders and the industry leaders in these respective states, we're going to get some information together that's going to be very potent to the congressmen and to the United States senators relative to this situation and what it's actually doing to all livestock prices in Alabama.
At the Legislative Council meeting today at the state capitol, I did suggest to the council the possibility of studying a bill which would make the state superintendent of education ineligible for the term for which he was elected for appointment by the State Board of Education to any position under its control. This then would make the state superintendent ineligible to become president of any of the state teachers' colleges that we have in the state. Of course, it would have no application at all to fill in the vacancy at the Troy State College, but it would apply to future appointments. Now, my thought is this, that the state superintendent is elected for a 4-year term, but frequently, soon after he goes in as state superintendent, an opening occurs in the office of president of one of the state colleges. And the state superintendent, being a member of the Board of Education, usually has a great deal of influence with the board. And we find in many cases that he steps down as state superintendent and then takes over the presidency of one of the colleges. presidential electors pledged themselves to support whoever the Democrats name as presidential and vice presidential candidates. They may be President Johnson and Bobby Kennedy. They might be Humphrey and Martin Luther King, for that matter. They pledge blindly in advance that they will support these candidates. The unpledged electors, of whom I am one, say that we are unwilling to pledge ourselves in advance to support the nominees of the Democratic Party. We want to cast our votes for candidates who are not hostile to the South. We want to cast our votes in such a way as to best benefit the state of Alabama. Now, Congressman Albert Raines over at Auburn the other day had some interesting things to say, and one of the things that he said was that we should not criticize the federal government. And I say that things have come to a pretty pass in America if we can't criticize the federal government. There are some countries in the world today where you can't criticize the government. Thank God America is not one of those countries. You can't criticize the government in Russia, and you can't criticize the government in China, but as long as we have a free America, we're going to be able to criticize not the American system of government, which is fine, but the manner in which those temporarily in charge of our American government discharge the duties of their office.
Legislative Council continued its meeting this morning. This morning we considered the question of tuition grants in aid. Various educators appeared before us and discussed many phases of the program. We had a report from the Director of the Legislative Reference Service on the practical operation of the grant and aid programs both in Virginia and in Louisiana. The Legislative Council decided that it would withhold any action on this matter pending various federal court decisions. We feel that we can work out some satisfactory solution to the grant and aid problem. It is a difficult problem to know exactly where to draw the line, but we're going to do our best to make a good recommendation to the legislature.
Our main goal is to create and maintain confidence in the businessmen and the professional men and women in our city. The most important service rendered by the Better Business Division is to combat fake solicitations and fraudulent or unethical practices. We issue public reports on a variety of subjects in order to inform the public about the various schemes of out-of-town promoters who may prey on our people to spend and waste money on unethical practices and dishonest schemes. Nothing is more valuable to the business than the confidence of its customers. Even though the facts may prove otherwise, a customer sometimes feels that he has been mistreated. Your Better Business Division provides the machinery, a method to handle complaints.
The main duty of being youth governor is one of good public relations. The big task that I have will be to attend the National Youth Governors Conference in Washington in the middle of June. At that conference I will of course represent the people and the state of Alabama, and I hope that I will be able to project a
good image of our state and the fact that the people of Alabama are sound and sensible. And also, the fate of any bill is in the hand of the governor. If he refuses to sign it, well then it's lost because of the lack of time. There's no time for a veto to be overridden. So the fate of all bills is in the hand of the governor, and also to be able to talk to people and let them know what an outstanding program the YMCA Youth Legislature is.
What values are derived from the Youth Legislative Program?
I think that perhaps the big part is the fact that we study the legislative procedures through which a bill has to go in order to become the law. We have the regular 5 legislative days, which are, by the way, crammed into 3 rural days. But we do go through every process. We go through committees, and students from all of the states who have never heard of the word reapportion or the word redistrict or many other problems that face our state, who have never heard of the word appropriation or the problems that face the Highway Department or the Public Service Commission, the various parts of our state,